Hi, everyone. I am Tina Ramirez, and it's great to be with you again today. I am very excited because today I have my friend Ajit Sahi with us. Ajit is live from Maryland, but Ajit is originally from India and is in the United States working with the Indian American Muslim Council, which I've known since, I guess, 2004 when I was working in Washington and done a lot of work with them. And so Ajit and I got to work a lot together in Congress on different issues related to India and to the persecution and oppression of different religious communities in India. So Ajit is a journalist from India who is working here with the IAMC, and he comes with over 20 years of journalism experience in India as an amazing journalist, investigative journalist, and someone who's really seen the front lines of what these issues are all about in India. So it's exciting to have him here and to have his expertise. And Ajit is also of Hindu background. So it's very fascinating to me, Ajit, that as somebody of Hindu background, where we see so many of so much of the conflict framed within a Hindutva, ideology, that you are here working with a Muslim organization defending people of all faiths. So Ajit, thank you so much for being here with me and doing this interview. And I am excited for everybody to hear more about what's happening in India and your work both here and over there. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me here.
You're welcome. Well, Ajit, let's go ahead and just get right into it. I would love for you to share just your personal background. Like, what is it like being a person of Hindu faith that's a journalist and that works with a Muslim organization? How did that all come about?
That's a very good question. I often get asked by, especially Muslims, you're not even Muslim. Why do you work for Muslims? And I always say, I'm not working for Muslims or Hindus or Christians. I'm working for the rule of law. I'm working for justice, for liberty, for freedom. And it's important to understand that if one is not free, then none is free. That's something that is critical.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's our philosophy here at Hardwired as well. We believe that all people have this natural spiritual impulse to be free to worship and however they choose. And so we defend all people. And I think it's something that we've seen in every country that the religious freedom and this freedom to believe is often the canary in the coal mine. How a country is doing on so many human rights based on how they treat their smallest minority. And often those minorities being people of faith and the way that they're treated is very indicative of the broader situation in a country. And in order to really advance peace and stability in many of these countries, you can't ignore the religious dimension of conflict. And you can't ignore that minorities need to defend majorities and majorities need to defend minorities. Human rights are for everyone. Having been to India myself, I've seen it firsthand. I remember actually being in India after the violence in what's now Odisha state, but Orissa state at the time. And I remember asking a group of secular, or I'm trying to remember, I guess they were secular Hindus. We were meeting together talking about all of these tens of thousands of people that had just been forced out of their homes by Hindutva mobs. And we were talking, they said, well, Tina, what are people in America doing? And I said, well, I don't know. That's a good question. So I remember emailing the Hindu American Foundation here in the United States, the secular Hindus here, the Hindus fighting for human rights for everybody here are wondering what you are doing and saying about this violence. And I remember them saying, well, we will say something as soon as the Christians, the other groups there stop forcibly converting Hindus. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So tell me for yourself, what kind of a backlash have you received there? Like being a Hindu human rights activist in India and journalist, have you received backlash? Have people responded to you that way? What is the response you've experienced?
Right. Let me start by saying that I would say that about almost 12 friends of mine are in prison right now in India, including Hindus, Muslims, and Christians. You know the case of Father Stan Swami, who was arrested about 4 or 5 months ago. What is happening in India is people like me are being hounded. I'm lucky to be here in the United States, but the current regime in India, it is absolutely anti-people, it is anti-freedom, it is anti-liberty. And anyone who questions the regime or who questions the xenophobic ideology of Hindu right wing, they are put away. You mentioned Hindu American Foundation. Hindu American Foundation is an interesting organization because they claim to speak in the name of Mahatma Gandhi. They claim to speak in the name of equality, but they actually are only a front for the Hindu right-wing ideology. They do not represent any belief in rule of law, in freedom for all, in equality for all, of all before law. So that is the real thing happening in India. Uh, the people who oppose secular, pluralist, multicultural people who believe that whether you are one or you are a million or you are 100 million, you all have the same rights. Those people are now being hounded in India.
I think that a lot of people, when, and we'll get into a little bit more specifics about what's actually happening in India, when they hear about India, they would just assume that everyone kind of has the same way of seeing things in India, but it's actually a lot more diverse, and which is important because then for the Hindu American population, just like for the Muslim American, Indian American population, it's important for them to understand that there's a diversity of perspectives within this community. You don't have to just, if there's one organization that says it speaks for you, you really need to be able to think critically, like, do they really speak for me before joining a group like that might actually reinforce more nationalist ideas or Hindu ideas that have actually led to a lot of suffering for people of all faiths, including people of their own faith in India. Is that right?
Yes, correct. You see, the Hindu nationalist ideology was first propounded as a treatise in 1921. That's how far back it goes. It's almost a century. Actually, 1921 and then 23. There was a man named Savarkar, and he published a treatise on Hindutva. And he said, for the first time, this was put down in print, and he said that India belongs to Hindus who are the original inhabitants of this land. Okay, and Muslims and Christians, they are foreigners, they are outsiders, and they do not pray to local gods, they pray to external gods. So therefore they will first have to accept the primacy of the Hindu religion, the Hindu gods, the Hindu culture. And if they don't do that, they will have to accept that they will be second class citizens in India. They will not have the same rights as Hindus. That is the ideology that guides even today India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, his political party, his affiliates. That is the ideology that guides Hindu American Foundation and other affiliates of the Hindu right wing, such as Hindu Swayam Sevak Sangh, such as the Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America, who work right here in the United States.
This is extremely helpful because so when I traveled to India to investigate the violence against so many religious communities there, I was in Orissa, or Odisha state now, as it's called, but I also was in Uttar Pradesh, in Lucknow, I believe. I'm not sure if I'm saying it correctly, visiting Muslim communities that were attacked and persecuted. And I met with Sikhs and so many other different faith communities that were really just brutally attacked in the name of this Hindutva ideology that you're mentioning. So when I met with the head of, I think it was the VHP, and I want you to explain what that is in a minute, but I met with the head of the VHP, which is, I think, the spokesperson, like the spokesperson wing of Narendra Modi's political party, the BJP, and the RSS, which is a different wing. So I want you to explain what those three are in a minute. But when I met with the spokesperson for the VHP, he said to me, India is for Hindus. If you were born here, you were born Hindu and you need to be reconverted. And so a lot of the violence that I was investigating, and I was working for a member of Congress at the time and working on foreign policy, and I even wrote legislation related to India at the time to help defend these persecuted, vulnerable groups. He said it was essentially that all of the violence that we saw in India was being perpetuated in the name of, we need to reconvert people that should be Hindu because India is a land for Hindus. If you were born here, you were born Hindu. And so a lot of that violence that we saw was really a result of this very nationalist ideology that was causing so much suffering, and really divisions even within the Hindu community. So can you explain those three groups and like how all of that works, and its relationship to Narendra Modi?
So after this gentleman named Savarkar published his short thesis on Hindutva, shortly after that, in 1925, an organization was formed in India by the name of RSS, which is short for Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh. It's quite a mouthful. Rashtri is nationalist. Swayamsevak is volunteer. Sangh means corps. So it's basically National Volunteer Corps, not very different from the National Socialists, also known as Nazis in Germany. This organization was founded by Brahmins, okay, and the RSS believes absolutely, they will not admit it, but in the last 1 century, nearly 95 years of their more than 95 years of their existence, they have absolutely believed in the caste system, in the division of the castes, in the believe they believe in keeping the lower castes at the lower level of society. And when they formed this organization, the explicit goal of this organization was to convert India into a Hindu nation. They call it Hindu Rashtra. Rashtra means nation in Sanskrit. As recently as 2 years ago, in 2019, the current chief of the RSS was asked a question by some journalist about Hindu Rashtra, and he said, you can Google it, and he said, Hindu Rashtra is non negotiable. All right. RSS was formed in 1925, and the RSS worked directly against India's freedom struggle, because remember, at that time, India was not free. India was under British colonial rule. Mahatma Gandhi was leading the struggle, the non-violent, peaceful struggle for independence from British colonial rule, and the RSS worked against that freedom struggle. Not one person from the RSS ever went to prison. They were informers of the British colonial rule. The people that in organizations like Hindu American Foundation revere, they were on the side of the British. Imagine if if there were people in the American War of Independence who had sided with the British, right? It's the same as that. The RSS subsequently grew bigger and bigger. And then in 1948, when Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated, his assassin had belonged to the RSS, because they believed, because Mahatma Gandhi said, everyone is an equal. He said, Hindus and Muslims are my two eyes. He said, I am a Hindu, I am a Muslim, I am a Christian, I am a Jew, I am everybody, right? And that's why they killed him. That's why this man who was Gandhi's assassin came from the RSS. Now, they started a political party, and over the decades, that political party kept gaining strength. The hands of the RSS are evident and present in every single sectarian violence in India over the last 100 years. Even today, this organization professes the same ideology that was propounded in 1923. This is how regressive they are. They are an ideology that preceded the Second World War by 15 years. That's the ideology that informs them. The RSS is the world's largest, most powerful xenophobic organization in power in a country like India. And the last point that I would like to share with you is that their goal to convert India into a Hindu nation is what drives the offshoots of the RSS, such as the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, VHP, which basically stands for World Hindu Council. And it has a counterpart here in the USA. It's called Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America, VHPA. They do absolutely the same thing. They attack mosques, they attack churches, they attack Muslims, they attack Christians during Mass, they burn Bibles, they desecrate churches, all of those things these people do, right? The police are with them, the judges are with them, the prosecution is with them, the government is with them, the civil authorities are with them. That is the current state of India. The Vishwa Hindu Parishad claims to fight for the rights of the Hindus, but what is basically is, it is one of the most reactionary xenophobic organizations in India, and it's part of the larger, what is known as the RSS family.
And Ajit, in my experience, a lot of people within the Hindu faith community probably have no idea about all of the history that you're sharing. I mean, I work with people of so many different faiths, and a lot of them really don't. I mean, I've never heard them understand that history. And even when I'm engaging with people, and I remember on some issues recently, there was a gentleman in Texas that was running for Congress who was deeply embedded with the BJP, the political wing of the RSS that Narendra Modi represents in India, and even tied to groups that had made very anti-Semitic comments. And there was just a lack of understanding within the community about that person's ideology and where it came from. And that person knew better, obviously, but unfortunately, so many of the general public are unaware. Why is that? And what are you doing to help try to raise that awareness?
Right, that's a great question. A lot of people don't know because India has had tremendous soft power in the West. It is remarkable that of the dozens of countries that overthrew colonial rule after the end of the Second World War in 1945, India is the only country that has sustained its experience with democracy. Until 1947, when India gained freedom from British colonial rule, India had never really had free elections with one man, one vote adult franchise elections. In 1952, India held its first election, and barring 1 year, it has continuously held elections. It has never fought. And if you look at other countries, be they in Southeast Asia, in Latin America, in Africa, even places like Portugal, Spain, even places in East Europe, in Central Asia, you will not. Even South Korea was had military rule. India has never had military rule. This sense of this deep commitment to democracy was given by Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi, who needs no introduction to the rest of the world. He is, Martin Luther King Jr. said, Mahatma Gandhi. It's only when I read Mahatma Gandhi that for the first time I realized what Jesus meant. To me, he was like Jesus. That's what Martin Luther King Jr. said. That. Until I saw Gandhi's work, I thought that what Jesus said about turning the other cheek was only for personal relationships. But Gandhi taught me how to use it for political purposes, right? For political use. So Gandhi gave us Indians a very strong commitment to democracy, to progressive values, and those lasted for decades. Gandhi was assassinated in 1948, but after that, the BJP, the RSS, and initially it had another political party. The BJP was created in 1979 or 80, and the BJP did not win elections for a number of years. But it's only with the death of the secular ideology in India, most political parties, although they claimed for decades to represent secular ideology, but when they were in power, they never really acted against, they never took any action against the RSS, the BJP, its murderous goons, its mobs, its vigilante mobs, because the police have always been involved with them. Because the Muslims are about 14% of India's population, the Christians are about 3%, but they have never really had enough representation in the police, in the prosecution, in the judges, in the government. So it's overwhelming. Even though Hindus are only 80%, I would imagine in the government, in the various arms of the government, they're more than 90%, some probably 95%. And that is why this has come to a point. There's a death of the alternative ideology of secularism. Nobody practices it anymore, and in the vacuum, the Hindu right-wing ideology has taken roots.
So I think this is a really important point. Let's go back to just the demographics of India. So India is it 1.2 billion people now? Is that right?
1.3 plus.
1.2 plus billion people,
1.3.
the largest democracy in the world, and the most diverse country in the world when it comes to religious diversity. Because when you say that Christians are only 3%, what is the number of Christians that actually exist out of 1.2 billion? I mean, that's a significant amount. That's more than many countries in the world,
correct.
Right?
35 million, correct.
And I think is it the second or third largest Muslim population in the world of any country?
Well, it's second largest after Indonesia.
Second largest. This is huge. And I don't think people really often think about that. And the idea of India in the beginning, Mahatma Gandhi's vision was a society without caste, without religious divisions, where people could come together and actually live in a pluralistic society, much like we tried to do in America, right? And yet for the first 30 years, you had a fairly vibrant pluralistic democracy. But what you're saying is that essentially a lot of the minority communities were never embedded into the power structure. And so then over time, that power structure was weakened and became more and more nationalistic, more and more associated with this idea of like India as a Hindu nation. Is that right?
Absolutely. You said it.
Okay. Well, so we come up to the 70s, 80s. Tell us about Narendra Modi. Where did he come from?
So Narendra Modi is from the western state of Gujarat. He's a Gujarati Hindu. He's from a caste that is considered to be on the lower side of the vertical hierarchy of the Hindu society. And of course, he has played it to his advantage all his life. He joined the RSS at the age of 8. Now, this is what the RSS does: it goes out and it gets people to come in and join them at a very young age. For example, India's defense minister today is somebody who was with the RSS from a very young age, as is India's president, which is a ceremonial post, and the vice president, which is also the ceremonial post. Now, Narendra Modi was a backroom boy for a very, very long time.
Hold on one second, Ajit. So this is an important point that I don't think people often understand. But when I was in India, I had it explained to me by several leaders in the RSS, the VHP, across the board. There are like tens of thousands of RSS, or I forget what they're called, the Bajrang Dal, these youth chapters in cities across India. How many are there? What is that called?
Nobody can know, right? The RSS is not even a registered organization, right? In fact, it recently got registered, but for the bulk of its life, it was not a registered organization. So
Yeah, if you
nobody
would
can know. They
estimate, when
claim
I
they
was
have,
there, I think they said like there were about 16,000 chapters of youth in
yeah,
this Bajrang Dal
absolutely.
across the country. I mean, it's a
I
huge
won't doubt
number.
that. I won't doubt that. See, India is a country where I would imagine, I mean, what are the figures of the United Nations? Or something like 40% of the population lives on less than $2 a day. There is mass unemployment in India. People have nothing to do. There is a tremendous amount of discrimination even within the Hindu society. So this is the interesting part. The RSS is made of, which is the head of the octopus, if you will. And the RSS is made of at the top and run by Brahmins. Okay. The current chief of the RSS is a Brahmin. In its entire history, except for one person, every one of its chiefs has been a Brahmin. Okay. But as you go lower down the chain and you get to the Bajrang Dal is made almost entirely the foot soldiers, the people who carry out the violence against Christians and against Muslims and attacks on mosques and churches. These are not Brahmins. They're not the rest of the upper castes. These are mostly the middle or the lower and the lowest caste people who are employed as the foot soldiers, right? That is how the hegemony of the Brahminical upper castes is maintained in this structure. They are very regressive. When India gained independence in 1947, and in 19 so and India adopted a flag. India's flag is unique because it has a saffron color at the top, which represents Hinduism. It has a white color in the middle, which represents peace, and then it has a green band in the lowest, which represents Islam. Because there was a green color in this, the RSS wrote right after independence, we reject this flag. India's flag should only be saffron flag, which is the color of Hinduism, or rather ritualistic practiced Hinduism. Okay. Now, when India's constitution was written in 1950 and adopted, they said in 1949 and adopted in 1950, the RSS wrote, we reject this constitution because it does not reflect the Hindu principles, right? Because the constitution gave equality for everybody. They said, no, we would like India's constitution to be the laws of Manu. Manu is Manu. It's a mythical figure. These are ancient Indian laws, which basically say the same misogynistic stuff that most ancient cultures talked about, how women are the unequal of man and stuff like that. And they really believe in the laws of Manu. Okay. They don't believe in the Indian constitution. They don't believe in equality. And they have spread all over the country. They are present. They've been working tirelessly. You have to give it to them. When all other political parties were busy making money, being extremely financially corrupt, and playing, vote, special interest politics, these people actually gave up their lives, literally dedicated their lives to the cause of Hindu nationalism. The RSS people who work in the RSS, they never marry. They leave their homes. They live, they live as a commune, right? They never get married. I know one person. His name is Manmohan Vaidya. He's octogenarian. He's very senior in the RSS. I met him once about 12, 13 years ago, and I asked him. I said, "Have you ever been a pracharak?" Pracharak is basically somebody who preaches, a preacher. That's a designation. And he laughed. He said, "No, I've never been a preacher, but 3 of my sons are preachers." And one of his son is now one of the top officials of the RS, and they are all unmarried. 3 of his 5 sons are unmarried. Another is a gold medalist in mathematics and is now in one of the Hindu temples. He's in charge of the string of Hindu temples in England, and he's one of the guys leading the Hindu right wing nationalism in England. So these people are deeply committed to the cause of xenophobia, regressive Hindu right wing nationalism.
Let's go back to Modi. You were beginning to tell me
Oh,
about how
yes.
he was raised up in this ideology. So
Right. So Modi had been a backroom boy until as recently as, so it's interesting. Until 2001, Modi had never held any office, any elected office. He was a backroom boy. He was literally the right-hand man of India's former interior minister, the equivalent of Homeland Security, but actually much more important than Homeland Security in the hierarchy. They call it Home Minister. So India's Home Minister is virtually second to the Prime Minister. And his name is L.K. Advani, who was Mr. Modi's guru, and who Mr. Modi stabbed in the back. It's everybody knows that, and everybody makes fun of Mr. Advani. Mr. Advani was the guy who ran the campaign, who led and ran the campaign that eventually led to the demolition of the 16th century mosque in Uttar Pradesh state in 1992, on which now a temple in the name of Lord Ram is being built. Um, so Mr. Advani, Mr. Modi was the right-hand man of Mr. Advani, and Mr. Advani installed him without even winning an election as the head of, it's like he made him governor of a state without winning an election. That's what Mr. Advani did. Soon as he became the head of that state administration in Gujarat, that happened in September of 2001. And in February of 2002, barely 5 months later, Mr. Modi organized the massacre of Muslims, of 2,000 Muslims by Hindu right-wing people. Everybody knows about that violence. You know about that. You've been to Gujarat, right?
So Gujarat is one of the states I have not been to, but when I was there, I was there in 2008, I guess.
The congressman went, right?
It was several years after the Gujarat attack, but because I had worked at the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom around the time of those attacks, I was very familiar with it and had been working with the Indian American Muslim community to try to draw attention to it. And then, of course, the U.S. Commission recommended and successfully that Narendra Modi be denied a visa to the United States because of his complicity in those attacks. I mean, he basically gave the stand down orders to the police. Don't let the protesters go and attack and kill Muslims. Don't do anything. And
role was more than just telling the police to stand down.
So please tell us more about that and what happened.
Right. So basically, it's a long story. Don't want to get into this. There was a train that was coming back from the city of Ayodhya, where this controversial temple is being built. At that time, the Hindus have been trying to build a temple on the ruins of that mosque, which they razed, claiming that this was the birthplace of Lord Ram, for which there is no historical evidence. There is not even a historical evidence that this has been a long-standing claim. This is a claim that has been a manufactured claim over the last 150 years. This claim, there is no historical evidence that this claim had ever existed about that piece of land. This is a 16th century mosque. They said that Babur was a Mughal king. Mughals were past, they were 17th century and 18th century, 16th, 17th, and part of the 18th century rulers of India.
Yeah.
Muslim.
And what happened?
Right. So so what happened was the train was burned. There was a fire in a train, and about 59 Hindus they died in that fire. Now, unfortunately, the fire in the train took place right next to a very poor Muslim neighborhood. Immediately, Mr. Modi created a story that it was the Muslims who burned the train from outside because they were angry with these people inside, because they were coming back from the city of Ayodhya as part of a campaign to build a temple there. Now, in fact, there is zero evidence, absolutely. In fact, the BJP, which is the political party of Mr. Modi, the BJP's mayor of that town had just a couple of days later given certificates of appreciation to Muslims from that neighborhood, saying that they helped us try to douse the fire by bringing us water and stuff. But Mr. Modi saw a tremendous opportunity, and he immediately painted it as an attack by Muslims on Hindus. And then the violence the next day was justified. What Mr. Modi did, he got all the 59 charred dead bodies, he put them in a parade and he took them around the city, and around the state to show the Hindus, look how, what has been done by Muslims to Hindus, right? And then the very next day, the violence started, and he was actually in the control room managing the violence. The violence, the subsequent years, the cases have told us the violence was carried out by men and women belonging to the RSS, BJP, VHP. One of them was a minister, a woman, a doctor, a woman and child, a pediatrician woman who was a minister in Mr. Modi's cabinet. She had led a mob that killed 96 people. So
Tell
that
us more about the scale of the violence in this attack. What the Gujarat attack, what was the scale of it? How many people died, and what did that look like?
by official count, 1,000 Muslims died. There were about 150 Hindus also who died in retaliatory violence. But it was basically, by unofficial count, by civil society reckoning, there were about 2,000 Muslims who were massacred here. Women, children. There is account. There was a hidden camera operation by a journalist done in 2007, where there are people who say, I felt awesome. I felt like I had worked for my Hindu religion. And they put spears. They literally put spears in the bodies of pregnant women and pulled out the fetus. That's what they did.
Ajit, when you share this, I don't think people understand how horrifying it was. And what's even more frightening for me is that I live in a neighborhood where I was recently in a convenience store in the neighborhood, and there was an Indian gentleman that was there, and I was talking to him about India, and I was so shocked at how proud he was of that violence. This is literally like, what, 15, 18 years later, and I met somebody in America who was talking about it proudly, and I just was so shocked. I didn't know what to say.
I'm a Hindu, Tina, you know that, right? I come from a
Yeah.
family, right? And I can tell you, my family, both on my father's and my mother's side, unfortunately, 99% of my family members have now lost their minds. There's no other way to put it. They have just gone crazy. These Indian Hindus are in the same mind space as the Germans were under Adolf Hitler in the 1930s and 40s. There is absolutely no explaining this except that they've gone mad. They've just lost their mind. This is something, the hatred for Muslims is so deep. It is so deep that it's going to take, I mean, sometimes I fear and I worry that it's going to take, because you see, xenophobia, it has a sell by date. Xenophobia is an ideology that cannot survive in the long run. Only progressive values can survive. I mean, North America and West Europe have succeeded in, especially since the end of the Second World War, because they have pursued peace, among themselves to begin with, and with the rest of the world subsequently. But India and Pakistan, they have been at war all their lives. Indian Hindus keep seeing Muslims and Christians as enemies within. It's like what Abraham Lincoln said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. That is what has happened. And there's immense cognitive dissonance in these people, these Indian Americans. They live in America. They have survived, and they have progressed, and they have been nurtured by the American values of equality for all, and yet they do not want equality for Muslims back in India. That's how it is.
So, it's interesting. After Gujarat, Modi was actually denied a visa to the United States because of his complicity in the violence. But then a few years later, in 2008, I was in Odisha state, as I mentioned, where a Swami had been murdered. The community claimed that the Swami was murdered by Christians. And so then the Bajrang Dal and these groups literally led mob attacks against the indigenous community, not all of whom were Christian, but some, but mob attacks, and tens of thousands of people, I think it was 50,000 people overnight, were displaced. And I remember being there just, I think, a week or two after the violence started, and being in these makeshift refugee camps with communities that had fled that violence. And just, I mean, these were innocent families. They were mostly indigenous, that were the lowest of the lowest castes, that because they didn't want to be forcibly converted into the Hindu nationalist, ideology, they were then the targets of these vicious attacks and used as really scapegoats for the Swami's murder. It was just horrifying. But then that violence has spread across India. We've seen it in Lucknow and in Uttar Pradesh in the north. We've seen it in so many different areas. And now that violence has gotten worse. Can you share a little bit just of that, kind of give us a brief overview of that violence in the last 10, 15 years that we've seen? What does that look like in India? How is what began in Gujarat, or was exacerbated in Gujarat, how has that grown since then?
Right. We must remember that India was born in sectarian violence. In 1947, when India gained freedom from British colonial rule, it broke into two parts. One was Pakistan, the other was India. There was mass transfer of human beings from what became Pakistan to India and from what became free India to Pakistan. In fact, historians say that it is in history, in recorded history, it is the largest migration, forced migration of people caused by a single event. Similarly, an untold number of people, mostly it is believed more than 1 million people, it may be several million, who were killed in that violence, people who were Muslims, people who were Hindus, people who were Sikhs, maybe some Christians too. But definitely these three communities, large-scale massacres occurred. It was a subcontinent that went mad. Violence against minorities continued to be, and of course, Pakistan, I'm not even getting into Pakistan. Pakistan became a basket case very soon. In India, it's not as if violence against minorities began with Modi. Violence in Gujarat, there was violence in 1969, um, about 33 years before Modi's violence, in which 5,000 Muslims had been killed. So violence against Muslims had been a steady role. Of course, the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, the Bajrang Dal, they were all formed in the 1960s, 70s, 80s. So the foot soldiers were expanding. The organization kept expanding, and the violence kept expanding. But the mass spread of the poison of Hindu nationalism happened in the 1980s, when the BJP, the RSS and the BJP, they adopted this campaign to demolish a mosque and build a temple in place of it in Uttar Pradesh. They made it a national campaign for Hindus. That's when the mass poisoning happened. I don't remember any of my family members, my uncles, my aunts, my older cousins, ever saying anything against Muslims or Christians. But it's only when in 1985, 86, this campaign started picking up, everybody started realizing I am a Hindu, right? This is exactly what is happening in India. Now, every walking Muslim, every walking Christian is a potential target, and every walking Hindu is a potential perpetrator. We see that happening all over India. There would be a group of 5 Hindus walking somewhere. I mean, just 4 days ago, there was a Muslim boy. He was probably 10 or 12 years old, and he was thirsty. He went inside a Hindu temple to drink some water, and there was another Hindu guy. He realized this boy is Muslim, and he beat him to pulp. And not only that, he actually got someone to video record him, and that video recording can be seen. 2 years ago, a Hindu man burnt a Muslim laborer, poor laborer, to death and made a video of it himself, right? And when that Hindu man was arrested and taken to court, the court was, a Hindu mob descended on the court, removed the Indian flag from the top of the court and put a saffron flag on top of that court. It is now what Modi has done. He has created a perpetrated out of every Hindu, virtually perpetrated out of every Hindu, and he has converted every Christian and Muslim into an object of hate. Now, when you say, how much has this expanded? Well, it's everywhere. We have seen lynchings of Muslims in the name of cow slaughter. And remember, just as Adolf Hitler and his Nazis did in Germany, they never accepted that they were killing Jews, and they were, persecuting Jews because they felt hatred towards them. No, it was always the fault of the Jews. Similarly, it is always the fault of the Christians. So if Christians were attacked in Odisha when in 2008, that is because the Christians had killed the Swami. It doesn't matter whether there was any proof or any evidence or not. Like I said in the beginning, the police is Hindu, the court is Hindu, the prosecution is Hindu, the district, the county administration is Hindu, the government is Hindu, the ministers are Hindu, the governor, equivalent chief minister is Hindu. Everybody is Hindu, right? And that's how it works in India.
When I was in Odisha state, I remember that some of the claims that the government type officials and the people in power made were that, well, these indigenous people, they're just trying to convert to Christianity or these other religions so they can get out of their caste and have benefits, but they actually lose their benefits when they change. So I was trying to understand, like, you're making this up. You're trying to put the blame on them, just like what you said. Tell me a little bit about one other thing that was happening at the same time in the last 20, 30 years of this violence growing, is that these anti-conversion laws were being passed, or as they're known in India, Freedom of Religion Act laws. And this is what, when I was there and I approached the Hindu American Foundation and said, hey, what are you guys doing? They attacked me and the community there and said, well, they have to stop forcibly converting people. And I'm like, well, I haven't heard of any forcible conversions other than literally in the midst of the violence in Odisha state, the people that were fleeing or that were captured by these Hindutva mobs were literally forced to shave their head, drink, I think it was cow urine, and do a ceremony to forcibly reconvert to Hinduism. So those are the only forced conversions I saw. So tell me a little bit about this and how that's exacerbated this violence.
Right. So the 13 years of my elementary, middle, and high school education were in a Catholic school run by priests in white robes. I never read the Bible there. They never talked about Christianity in that school. In that school, 99% of children were Hindus. To this day, that school was founded in 1882. All right. Next year, that school would be how old? 82, 50, 150 years old, right? No, 140 years old. Next year, it will be, that school will be 140 years old. In its 140-year history, there's not one student who can stand up and say that school run by Catholic priests ever taught even Bible or spoke to its students about Christianity. There was a chapel on the premises of the school. Nobody ever asked children to go to that chapel. I have never seen, I have worked very closely with Christians. I have never once seen anybody forcibly converting to Christianity. You see, the problem is, I would ask you to go back to the laws of Manu. Hindu religion, as understood by these people, is severely discriminatory. It is vertically, it's hierarchical, it has a vertical hierarchy. It is dominated by the Brahmins. The Brahmins so the fundamental precept of Hinduism is that the original creator of the universe is called Brahma. The Brahmins were born from the forehead of the Brahma. And as the castes go lower down, then somebody was born from the mouth, somebody was born from the chest, someone from the stomach, and the lowest caste untouchables were born from the feet. That is the creation of the universe. So the universe created unequal people. That's what the fundamental precept of Hinduism is, what they believe in. Mahatma Gandhi gave an alternative idea. He said, absolutely not. Hinduism is about equality. Now, that is why they hated Mahatma Gandhi. That is why they assassinated him. The man I started this conversation by talking about the man called Savarkar. He was an accused as the main conspirator in the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. Mr. Modi today bows before the statue of Savarkar, and they call him a national hero because he propounded Hindutva and he was the main conspirator. He wasn't sent to prison because the government took pity on him and he had millions of followers. So then they let him go, right? But he died in 1968-69, but he was a main conspirator of Mahatma Gandhi's assassination. These are the two alternative visions of Hinduism that India has seen in the last 100 years. One was Mahatma Gandhi's, who said the world is a family, everybody is equal, and that is what my Hinduism teaches me. And the other was Savarkar, who said India belongs to the Hindus, everybody else is an outsider, the men are superior to women, the upper caste are superior to lower castes. right? I mean, Savarkar didn't say that last part, but that is how the RSS has evolved the theory further. What is happening today in India, just to answer your question, what is happening fundamentally, they don't want lower castes to convert out of Hinduism, because if the lower castes go away from Hinduism, the Hindu society will collapse. You see, because there not only is there not only do they lose their benefits, the affirmative action benefits, the lower castes actually are prevented from conversion by these so-called freedom of religion acts, right? The entire state, again, go back to what I said several times earlier, the police, the prosecution, the judges, they're all Hindus, and they don't want anybody converting to Christianity and Islam. I can absolutely tell you, if today these so-called laws were taken away, if the police stop filing fraudulent cases, I would imagine, I would say millions of Indian lowest castes will immediately start converting to Christianity and Islam. That's my belief, because I work with them, I meet them. They're suffering from, even today, there is intense caste discrimination. And that is what the Indian American Hindus have brought. There was a news story from Bloomberg just 3 or 4 days ago, which talks about how in Silicon Valley, Indian American engineers have brought the caste system here, and they are now discriminating against the lowest caste Hindus who have come to the United States. This is how pervasive it is.
Yeah, and I saw that firsthand when I was there, and just seeing the violence. I remember being in Odisha, and one of the gentlemen that came, I don't even remember what religious background he was, but I remember he was a general in the army that had fought in, like, on the Indian border against Pakistan with, there was a lot of Sikh violence up there at the time. So he had literally defended India, and he had a wad of his money hidden underneath his bed in their like tiny little house. And when the mobs came in, he had to run, but his brother, who was paralyzed, was unable to get out. And he shared with me how he was literally hiding in the fields next to his home as his paralyzed brother was burned alive. I mean, I don't,
This
the
is
things that I've seen and heard in India, if
Hindu
people
right-wing,
understood.
Hindu nationalist right-wing ideology is inherently regressive and deeply violent. They have practiced violence on the lowest castes. They call them untouchables. They would not touch them. They would not see them. The lowest caste people could not even walk the same roads as the upper caste people, right? In my family, I have seen such discrimination. My grandmother practiced it. I loved my grandmother, but she practiced it. She would not let a lower caste person enter the house. She would not touch them, right? So, and this violence, and it's been a socio-economic violence. It's always the upper castes never do any work. They have never done any work. All of their building their houses, from doing their household chores, from all of the things is done. But the only time the upper castes are more than willing to physically touch the lower castes is when they rape the women belonging to the lower castes. That's when they're happy to catch those women and rape them. And that happens all the time.
We saw that in Odisha State. We heard of nuns that were raped during that violence, brutalized. I mean, I think there was a priest that was murdered, chopped to pieces.
Right. Don't forget Graham Staines, the Australian pastor, who was burned to death.
Burned alive in a car with his two children.
Sons and his wife. She forgave the killers, right? Yeah. So these are the people who killed Mahatma Gandhi. There have been very few figures like Mahatma Gandhi in the history of humanity, and they killed him, right?
Well, and I think, Ajit, what you're saying is so important, because really you understand that there are these two conflicting ideologies that have come out of the birth of India as a more recent democratic nation. Correct. And a lot of people are not familiar with that. They're taught that the Narendra Modis of the world, or the Hindu nationalist, wing of the party, it is the only alternative in India, but it's not the case. And especially for, Indian Americans, whether they're Muslim or Hindu, to understand not only the history, but that living in a pluralistic society like we do, where there are these freedoms and we're not stratified, that people can go up and down the social ladder and make a way for themselves, that these are the values that we need to be promoting, not just here amongst one another, but that we need to be encouraging our family and friends in India towards as well, because that's really the hope of their future. Is there this vision that Gandhi and these others had where we can live together in peace? At Hardwired, we've seen that it's possible all over the world. We believe it's possible in India. And when I see the communities that have been suffering and attacked under this climate of impunity and this nationalist spirit in India, my heart breaks, because I know that there is a better way, and that for the sake of all India, and so many, just leaders that have come from India, that's what we should be working towards, not this fear-driven populist movement that's actually leading to just suffering, but also to really destroying the democratic foundations of the country itself, because it can't be sustained under this ideology. That's just the reality. We've seen it destroy too many countries.
India is the most, I would say, India is the most alarming case for three reasons. One is because of its size, okay, 1.3 billion people, okay. If all of India's Muslims were to become a separate country, they would be the world's fifth most populated country. Okay, India would still be the world's second most populated, right? So India is the state of Odisha you keep talking about. It's got nearly 60 million people. That's almost the population of Great Britain, right? Just one state. Earlier in this conversation, you talked about the diversity in India. India has 16 official languages. On India's currency notes, you will find the denomination written in 16 languages. There are so many parts of India I go to and I don't understand what they're saying because they're speaking a different language that I've never learned, right? So that is how it's incredible. Like in Odisha, their language is Odia. I can't speak Odia. I don't understand Odia. In Bengal, it changes. In South, it changes. So it's different. This is the first reason. That's why it is the most alarming case. Secondly, India has been a shining example of democracy in the third world, or what is now called the developing world, right? Um, the Indian democracy, the experience of Indian democracy has existed only in the West. The way India has rigorously pursued democracy, electoral democracy, has not really happened anywhere outside of the West. Now that is failing. Freedom House, which is a Washington, D.C. based, very prominent think tank research organization, this month in March of 2021, downgraded India's democracy from free to partly free, right? So the fact that India has been a democracy, India has been a soft power, not just in the West, but also in the rest of the world because of its experience of democracy. And a large number of countries, in especially Africa and Southeast Asia, have believed that if India can do democracy, so can we. So if democracy fails in India, it will have it is feared that it will have a domino impact. The third reason why it is most alarming is the sheer number of people who are persecuted. Whether you look at Nigeria or you look at the Yazidis, I mean, they're facing intense persecution. The people, there's intense persecution, but these are very small numbers of people compared with Indian minorities. Like I said, India has 20% minorities. That means 260 million people, right? That's almost the population of the United States. That's about 80% of the population of the United States. That is the number of people we are looking at who are being persecuted and who face potential statelessness. So these three things make India's situation the most dire and the most alarming.
And the world can't afford more instability. It's we need to move forward. So
The interesting thing is, while Pakistanis don't really care what the West thinks of them, okay, Indians are supremely, acutely conscious, self-conscious. They really care about what the world thinks of them because they like to believe, especially the upper caste Hindus, they like to believe, oh, we are pristine, we are very nice people, we are very good people. So anything, so that's why they get so hurt when Freedom House writes something, when, that's why you see organizations like Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America, Hindu American Foundation, they protest, they immediately start protesting when you say anything about India. Pakistanis don't bother. And that is an opportunity for the United States government, because the Indian upper caste Hindus and the Indian government is so thin skinned. Therefore, that is your opportunity to call them out, work with them. It's very important for United States and India to be good partners and close partners. So I support President George W. Bush, President Obama, President Trump, and President Joe Biden, all the four last presidents, in building a closer relationship with India. That's important. That's very important. But also call out bigotry and xenophobia in India at the same time.
Right. And that's what good friends do.
And that's what good friends do.
Okay, Ajit, I'm so glad we got to spend time together today. Thank you for all of your insight. And I really appreciate you and all that you're doing. So um, please
Thank
keep
you for
up
having
all the good
me.
work.
And God bless Hardwired. You're doing great job. This is wonderful. I absolutely admire you. You're campaigning for the rights of everybody, for freedom, for religion, religious freedom, for people who believe in religion, for people who do not believe in religion. I mean, that's outstanding work you do. And I wish you great success. And I wish Hardwired great success.
Thank you, Ajit. All right. Well, until we meet again.
Yes, we meet again. Bye bye.